Thank you very much. Let's move to Julie now. Julie Finley Cooper is the managing editor of the Natchez Democrat. She was editor of the Daily Mississippian in 2001 and 2002, and then 2002 and 2003. The only person to serve 2 full years. And I'd have to start by asking you, why?
I was told at the time because I was crazy. I didn't feel that way. Honestly, I mean, it was the way it worked out. I started young. I started working, I think I was news editor by the end of my freshman year, so it was logical for me to go ahead and run for the selection of the editor position that year. And then at the end of that term, there honestly wasn't anybody else on the staff that wanted it or that was ready. And we knew that if there was somebody out there that wasn't currently working on the staff, they didn't need to be running that newspaper. I mean, you know, you got to work up a little bit, have put in some time, you know, getting to know everything. And so it just worked out that way. I mean, it really wasn't any goal going in. It's just, there was a need at the time, and I was happy doing it. I mean, I guess, you know, the true crazy folks are the ones that don't know they're crazy, so maybe they were all right, but.
It's funny how timing is, because I desperately wanted to be editor, and the year that I could have run, I couldn't do it, and there were 2 or 3 other people that wanted to run and couldn't because of the qualifications that you had to have, and then the next year I had to run against 2 people to win, and then you got it almost by default, but good for us that we had you to do that.
There was another person who started to run but dropped out halfway through the second time around.
Well, obviously, as we look back in the scope of history, the most memorable thing for you, and for us probably, is for your having been editor during 9/11. You want to talk about that experience?
Sure. That would have been at the beginning of my first term, and most of the staff at that point was relatively new too. We had, I guess, taken over in April, so we'd had April in a slow summer, which is always a different pace than everything. Fall starts in August, school starts, it gets busy, and then boom, beginning of September, probably the biggest, you know, news story in America in decades. I was at home asleep in the morning like any good college newspaper editor at about 9 o'clock. Classes were always in the afternoon, and always at the paper late till midnight or a little bit after sometimes, so I was asleep. Somebody on my staff called and delivered the news to me of what had happened, and you know, it sort of sunk in slowly, I guess, but probably within an hour we were all in the newsroom, and some of us had called others, some of us had just come. I mean, in a good newsroom, people know to come there when news happens. So we were all gathered, I believe, around a dry erase board we had on the wall, sort of making lists of things to ask, things to do, stories we knew we were going to cover, and what was going to unfold the rest of that day. Ironically, it was supposed to be the day we were shooting our yearbook photo for the Student Media Center, and we knew that was in the afternoon, and had that kind of in the back of our minds all day long. And then we just started dividing things up and going out. I mean, it was a surreal day, I think, for everybody in this room, certainly not just us, but by the end of the day, after we'd gone out to, I mean, at that time there was people lining up at gas stations, just getting gas in their cars. Everybody was just sort of panicked. So covering some of that regular panic, the university had a vigil that night, and students gathered. Obviously, we went to that. That's where our front page photo ended up coming from. At the end of the day, and I really don't even have any clue what time it was, when we finally sat down and said, okay, what's the front page going to look like? But we all gathered around the table in the middle of the newsroom and talked about what we had and how we wanted to play it in the newspaper. Made the decision partially out of necessity and partially out of desire. We didn't have AP photos, so we didn't have any photo of planes crashing into the towers. We had some that were submitted to us by former Ole Miss students who were in the area. We had access to it. I think AP opened it all up that day where we could have gotten it, but initially we were not trained to think, pull an AP photo. And then we thought about it, and I mean, our story was about what's happening on the Ole Miss campus. How are the Ole Miss students dealing with this? What do they see? And when we had a great shot from one of our photographers from the vigil of 2 students, you know, having an emotional response to it, and that was clearly to us the way to illustrate this is what it means at Ole Miss. So we went with that, and then the next big discussion became, what should the headline be? I think we probably spent 30 minutes or an hour trying to decide. what that should be. I'm sure it's happening all over the country in every newsroom. Went with One Nation Indivisible, just wanted something that wasn't terror and wasn't depressing almost, even it was a very depressing day, but we wanted to sort of focus on what's coming, how are we handling this, what's going to come out of this, and we thought that worked with the vigil the students had and things they were saying. Certainly a crazy day, no different than any other journalist anywhere in America. So I think we handled it covering the news story in our town that happened to be world news.
So 10 years later, looking back on that front page that was done with some emotion and the deadline constraints, to me that front page looks very good 10 years later. How about with you?
I think so too. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, we're happy with it. I'm still proud to this day that we chose to do the Ole Miss students on the front. I mean, you flip through, I think the Pointer Institute did a book, and I have that book, and you flip through, and it's towers and explosion and the same thing over and over and over. And I think it was a handful that were featured in that book, maybe less than 5, that had people that were not in New York or in D.C. That illustrated what was going on around the country. We're a student newspaper. Our story is our campus, and I'm very proud to this day that we made that decision to do that we covered. We didn't just have an AP story at the top of the page. We had a local story talking to local students, some Ole Miss folks who were up there that we'd gotten in touch with, but telling it through the students' eyes. So yeah, I still think it looks good. Could still find a few things to change about it, I'm sure, 10 years later, but I'm happy with it.
Good. Let's talk about what you're doing now. You are the top-ranking Mississippi journalist at a daily newspaper who's a former editor of the Mississippian. You're the managing editor of the Natchez Democrat. I'd ask you, I mean, these are tough times and probably not the best of economic times in Natchez. How tough is it being editor in Natchez now?
I don't think it's any tougher than it would have been 10 or 20 years ago for an editor in Natchez. I probably have a different outlook on the future of newspapers and the future of reporters and journalists than most folks in this room. So you can put me on a different panel and I'll talk all day.
No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to be on a different panel. That's my next question. What is your outlook?
I mean, we're in community journalism. It's a community newspaper. It's not what you think of when you think of larger city work or even AP work. So we have been operating at a pretty small staff, at a pretty tight, everybody sort of knows how to pick up a camera and go shoot a photo when they need to. Everybody knows how to put a page together. They've been doing that in Natchez since I was in elementary school and longer. So that model was there when I walked in the door. We have just continued that. We very much, people in our community look to us for the news across the board. There's no one else out there doing that. We have the market on that. We will continue to for decades to come, I feel. So we didn't really have that major pinch that a lot of other major media organizations have felt in the last 5 or 10 years. We were already there. I mean, we were already a small staff. We were already doing 2 or 3 things at once. And our community knew us and still knows us to be the same that we have been as far as we bring them the story. I mean, sure, we tell it in different ways now. We have video cameras. We do Facebook updates and feed news stories to Twitter. But overall, we've done surveys of it and talked to folks in town. People still go to the print edition for that news. We have a lot of online readers, a very active website. Having the opportunity for them to post their comments and say what they want makes that a wide open field. So there's certainly a lot of readership there, but we still feel that our print product is our strongest and will be for years to come, and really don't have any fear of that. Sure, it changes. Sure, the economy hurts. You know, Natchez is sort of stuck down there in the corner of Southwest Mississippi, so we feel like we get forgotten sometimes, and economically it's not doing as good as it used to, but it's strong.
So you're optimistic?
Yeah, certainly I am, and I feel like people coming out of journalism school can decide they want to work for a newspaper, and there's a career in that. There may not be a career climbing the ladder and going to large metro dailies like there used to be. I'm sure there's still some of that, but it may not be as widespread as it used to be. But there are dozens and dozens of community newspapers just in our area, just in the South, that are looking to hire folks and that have careers for young folks that want to come do it. Now, like I said, we always have done more than one thing. We weren't just reporters, just editorial writers, or just photographers. So that's still there. You're going to have to juggle a couple of things, but you do it with a team, and everybody in the office can sort of lend a hand when it comes to that.
That's great. Ed Williams talked earlier about the importance of the relationship between the editor and publisher. How's your relationship with your publisher?
He's my husband. He's in the front row.
That's good.
Very good.
Good. In the internet, yes, intimate relationship. Yes, absolutely. It helps to be able to sleep with the publisher. Well, they're married.
He was my boss before we were married, so that makes it more complicated, I suppose.